What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. We give you one big story, 3 short stories, wins, losses, and an action to take. My name is EJ Carrion. I am with my co-host Ann Zeta and our producer, Wesley Kirk. What's going on, team? What a weekend.
It's been a busy time.
No Kings. 5 million people across the country.
Oh, did you add up all those things?
Yeah, I read a news article about it. 5 million people across the country.
I saw one individual in like South Carolina somewhere who was down there all by himself with one little sign. It was, and he's like, all the comments were like, "Please count this man in the totals. Please count this man in the totals."
Yes. And like such a good turnout for Fort Worth too. I was really delighted when I showed up. Like easily 3 times more than last month, if not more. Like
yeah, because last month we had a protest, which was great. I mean, and even at that time, the organizers of that protest said police officers who were making sure that it was organized and safe, they said this is the largest we've seen in a long time. So then you come back with a double, triple. Mm-hmm. What is this? You get those people on Facebook or like social media. It's like, oh, like, don't think this has changed. You just are pumping the people who already vote. Like, what is y'all's take on how do you assess? Like, are you like, because we always go through this where we get really excited, we get hope, and then you're like, Governor Abbott somehow destroys Beto O'Rourke, and you're like, dang it.
Well, that's what I like about how they've been doing it last month and this month is that it can get a bit annoying when there's a protest where people just march and then they go home and there's no way to turn that into any kind of action. But now that we have like speakers, we have tables with organizations that people can get plugged in with, it's such a good way to like take that passion, that anger, that momentum and just keep it moving into actual progress.
Yeah, and I think we had several people approach the table that we had set up where we were just handing out stickers and a flyer about an action. And they were asking, where can I donate? Because we were giving out water. Yeah. I didn't realize at first that they were just trying to give us money for the water. And I was like, no, we're not taking donations. But I was sending them down the row to people who definitely have a setup for taking donations and financial support in order to continue the action and educating folks and getting more people involved. I always, when I approach those things, I always park a little further away and then walk up. And I'm always like, is there going to be a lot of people? Or are there only going to be a few people? You know, everything that we've done in the last couple of months where there's been bringing together of folks, I have been pleasantly surprised at the turnout and the diversity of the turnout, age-wise, culturally, everything. I think that it's grown. I think that it's still obviously not everybody in equal numbers to what the population is, but I think there's people have concerns about safety and that sort of thing. So I can understand why not everyone participates in the same way. I saw a story of one woman who showed up at the protest, then called her mom and basically said, I want you to experience this. But her mom was elderly and couldn't come and be like in the park in the heat. So she brought her mom in a car and they did the perimeter. Yeah. And a lot of people were doing that. And I think for the most part, those people were in support. I was a little worried about the bus getting caught up in the traffic. I didn't want the buses on time records to be messed up with all of the traffic, but I think everybody made it through.
Yeah. You guys ever heard that like saying it's about like 3% to change something? Like, you only need 3%? I mean, 5 million of our population is 1.5%. So, I mean, like...
And that's just the people who were free today.
Yeah, on a Saturday. So it's like, that's a powerful number right there, that half the people were able to proactively show up and do that. Like, that's pretty inspiring. Mm-hmm. But, like, I don't want to get over my skis on the excitement, but it was such a great day. I mean, you got, what do you say, 4,000 to 5,000 at ours?
I mean, they said the police said between 1,500 and 2,000, but I thought it was
easily more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. 2,000. I was talking to Eddie, which shout out to Indivisible Fort Worth, shout out to Sabrina Ball, everyone who did what they did. I mean, super inspiring. But he was telling me he's like, we're at over 2,500 sign up to RSVP or whatever. Yeah. And I don't think any of us did.
Mm-mm.
Right?
I did.
No.
Oh, you did. Look at that. See, but I think a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
So it's like, we over hit that 2,000 mark for sure.
Yeah, just by people who RSVP'd.
But what about Sabrina's thing? Which one? I mean, Sabrina's Indivisible 12. what was it? The March of Dissent.
March of Dissent.
How incredible was that?
That was powerful. Yeah. I wish I had, I have been not taking pictures and videos of things that I've been going to lately. I've just been trying to show up and
Can you actually give
moment.
the podcast people perspective of what we're talking about when we talk about the March of Dissent and what it is? Like, describe what we saw, just so they know what it was.
For people who haven't watched the series, Handmaid's Tale, it was a group of, I think, like 80 people.
Good number.
Yeah, dressed in the red robes with the white hats,
binder bonnets,
all lined up in formation and marching through the streets of Fort Worth.
Yeah,
and it made national news. I think there were coverage everywhere. There was eerie music playing as they marched, and basically highlighting kind of rights of women specifically that have been infringed upon with kind of the way that our politics is moving these days. So that happened at 11 a.m. and then the regular No Kings rally started at noon. So a lot of people were showing up before 10, starting to fill in at the park, and they took off from the park and made a loop. And I didn't follow them, so I've relied upon other people's.
They're good photos, yeah. One of the folks from the Gather had like incredible photos of the whole march.
Yeah, shout out Marco. But what I'm impressed on, just seeing how the social media works, what's great about being more in community, in person, and seeing what's magic for in person. Like, I think the March of Dissent was impactful locally, but the feeling and the emotion that it received on the internet actually is what landed the magic the most. Because, I mean, you're talking, I've seen multiple pieces of social media content in the hundreds of thousands and the millions from that march of 80 women doing that at 11 a.m. And when I would say, like, when you had the No Kings rally, things that probably didn't go viral, but that were special, were like the people dancing and doing like a line dancing, and they were all like walking the block. And like, that was really cool to see that big group, but it didn't make the magic where I think the March of Dissent made. I mean, that went international. Like, there are some high odds that Donald Trump could have saw that. Like, you just like it landed so well. And for Fort Worth to get recognized on social media, which is a universe of itself, that moment was so historic for us. Even though locally I felt like it happened, and it was like a thing that happened, but we all were like waiting for No Kings rally to happen. But how it landed on the internet, man, that was so awesome to see that work. And the algorithm just took it off. I mean, it was really cool to see.
I think we need to run around and make sure that it's labeled Fort Worth, Texas.
I do.
Everywhere we go, because I'm sure everybody knew that's where that was.
That is true. I wish her indivisible 12 sign actually said, like, Fort Worth, Texas at the bottom. Like, that would have been cool.
Well, I just wanted to say, like, one thing that I was impressed by, like, when I showed up, beyond just the sheer numbers, was the fact that I didn't see a single cop the whole day, which was very nice, because I had so many conversations with people leading up to it about, peaceful, violent protest, all that kind of stuff. And, one of my friends, she was driving behind the National Guard as they were coming into town, and it, like... And, Greg Abbott is, saying all of his dumb inflammatory stuff, trying to exacerbate the issue. And so, like, and I don't know, and only violence I've ever seen at protest comes from the cops. And so that was my worry. And my wife was concerned for her safety, like just going from her car to the protest. Once you're in the crowd, you couldn't be safer. But like, she was wearing her Oaxacan skirt, her Ice Out of Tarrant shirt. She looked as Mexican as can be. And she just wanted to be sure that she was safe. And then we got there, didn't see a single cop, and saw so many people out there. Sorry. She got really choked up when we saw how much community there was and how energized everyone is to support each other and protect each other and keep each other safe. And it feels very nice to like be in community and see how much people care for one another. So
yeah,
it was very nice.
I wish everybody could see that. I'm trying not to go down the rabbit hole of naysayers and negative comments that I've seen on social media about it, because I felt that too. And I parked quite a little ways away and walked in. And I think to your point about feeling vulnerable when you're not in the crowd, that's when I felt vulnerable too. When I was walking back to my car by myself, there was somebody behind me and they were taking the same turns I was taking. And I wasn't sure who they were or what they, where they were headed. And it turned out that they were just going in the same place that I was, but I felt that vulnerability away from the crowd as well. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah. And I think, Wesley, how you kind of shared it, it's like, I think ultimately, like, that's what Fort Worth needs to, we deserve to feel that way every day.
Exactly.
I mean, the Pride community should be able to feel that way. I mean, there should be Pride flags up and down our downtown celebrating this month. There should be Juneteenth flags. There should be statements by our politicians saying that we are not allowing ICE in our communities for people can feel safe. And that's why I think this moment and why this podcast, I do feel, has gotten so much more political and so much more proactive on trying to do things outside of just hosting the podcast, is because we realize we need to do stuff like this. And it's just great to see, I mean, the community that we have built. I'm starting to see organizers at things like, hey, Pam, with whatever, Justice League, and hey, this person over here with this, and all these different people coming together. So, and I do think, like, for better or for worse, what happened for NLA allowed such a youthful Latinx community to the protest that probably wasn't there in the one we went to that you were talking about in May. Like, it came this time, the Mexican flags, and that is so important, because that is becoming and is the majority of Texas, and it is becoming, your wife is the average Fort Worthian, a 30-year-old Latina, like, that is the thing. And so if we can activate and have that allyship across our diverse communities to mobilize at that size, that's why the infighting and the tit for tatting is so important. Like, to not allow it, the naysayers, to break that synergy that we currently have, because we still got a year and a half until 2026 elections. So I did another part. What was your guys' take on, I want to recognize, Elizabeth Beck was there.
Yep. Saw
Chris
her.
Nettles was there. And Mia Hall was there.
Yep.
And I think, and they weren't there to speak. They didn't speak. They were taking photos with signs. They were saying, they were waving the people. And to me, I think for someone who's trying to, because I spoke about, hey, this is Fort Worth Council. We have a majority Democrats. This is a time for us to actually move on blue values and push our city to be like the other big blue cities like Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. And I know we're unsure about the stableness of how strong our Democrats are, and a lot of what Mia Hall has went through and what we've talked about on this pod, what we've seen in social media and in campaigns, is she a Democrat? And for me, she was the most important person for me to see at the rally, seeing Mia Hall there, because
it shows us where she stands.
It shows us where she stands in a big way. And I don't know if she intended to do that directly, because she wasn't like out there saying I'm Mia Hall. She was just there. But for me, who knows who Mia Hall is, that gave me a lot of, okay, we might be able to do something really special over the next 2 years here in Fort Worth.
I agree.
All right, so I will introduce short story number 1, as I am wearing the shirt. So the mayor of Fort Worth declared...
The y'all means all shirt for people
Yes.
who are not on YouTube.
So, that's
Which
right.
you should be on YouTube if you aren't, so you could see it as well. But it's the y'all means all
Sorry about that. Yes.
with the pride colors.
Now we have to navigate both being listened to and seen.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the seen part makes me think about what I put on my body every time I come down here to record, but I'm glad to have this on today. And to one of the points that you made before about people showing up and being supportive of these things during Juneteenth and Pride, I think it's important to reiterate how important it is to do it all the time.
Yes.
Because when we talk about the reactions we get from people when they notice that we're wearing something that has a rainbow on it, or something that indicates that we are supportive. The responses that I get from people in the public, just strangers. I'm at a store buying something and the young person behind the counter says to me, "I like your purse," or "I like your pin." And I know what that means. And I get a lot of that in June, and I just would love to get that all year round. So I think it reminds me.
It's funny you say that, because I think every time I've seen you this month, I have complimented your Pride purse.
Yes,
So.
I get lots of compliments on my Pride purse. It's like the most popular of my Pride apparel.
And I appreciate that we started short story number 1 on Anne's swag and drip as a good dress person. But the story is...
Yes.
So there is a short story entitled "Fort Worth Mayor Declares Y'all Means All with Recognition for LGBTQ Pride Month." Maddie Parker spoke. We call it a proclamation. We call it a recognition. It is a recognition because last year, to the not so great side of all of this, there was an attempt at a proclamation, which was a procedure by which the entire council could recognize something, but it had to be signed by everyone unanimously. And that didn't happen last year.
Am I correct in remembering that since we started doing Pride proclamations, it was every year up until last year?
Yes.
Okay.
And when we say every year, do we know when that year started?
It started before I was on council, I believe.
Wow.
So, because Joel Burns was the council member in District 9 before me, and he was there when the Rainbow Lounge incident happened in Fort Worth. And that's when we started on a trajectory of improving relations in Fort Worth.
And what year was kind of that year-ish?
It was 2009.
That's when we started moving in.
And for anyone who doesn't know, what we're talking about is in 2009, the police raided Rainbow Lounge, which was like Fort Worth's main gay bar, and just started beating people up.
It was the police and the...
That is wild.
It was the police and the Alcohol Beverage Commission
TABC.
under the guise of checking on alcohol licensing, that sort of thing. And it got violent and people were hurt. And there was a huge uprising, and people came forward and they formed a committee and they put in place rules and policies in Fort Worth about how people are treated and equal treatment and training for police officers and training for employees, and all of that came out of that incident.
Yep. It's Fort Worth's mini Stonewall.
Yep, exactly. And actually it was on the anniversary of Stonewall that it happened, I believe.
Wow.
Even more diabolical.
Yeah, I think that's why there was a lot going on in the Rainbow Lounge that night. There were a lot of people there.
And so it was a proclamation up
in the
until
past,
last year.
it's been a proclamation.
Yeah,
And last
every
year,
single
when they
year.
attempted to do a proclamation that they have done multiple years in a row prior, several council members refused to sign.
And that's
Pittiness.
Macy Hill, Charles Lauersdorf, Alan Blaylock, and Michael Crane. They refused to sign. And since it had to be unanimous and they were refused, they couldn't do it at all.
Yep. Is this just they had discourse internally, or what happened to...
Each year, the proclamation is different and it highlights different things. And last year's proclamation focused on some organizations in the community that do work in support of LGBTQ community members. And from what I read in articles, I didn't speak to any of these people directly. Some of them didn't have knowledge of some of the organizations that were highlighted and didn't feel comfortable supporting a proclamation that highlighted organizations that they were unfamiliar with. But I would say that most of them...
Google is free.
Exactly. And most of them specifically called out the ones that were supportive of trans individuals. And so I think that, and clearly in the statements made for this recognition, that is something that's still holding some of these council members up.
Well, but because of that, then they changed how proclamations work entirely.
They got rid of proclamations altogether. So there is no longer
They still call it that, though.
Tool, but it's not
it's not
signed.
printed,
Not everybody's
yeah.
signatures are on it. So the only citywide or organization-wide tool you have now is a recognition that the mayor's office puts out, or individual council members can do recognitions, which is what Elizabeth Beck did last year. She did a recognition from her office, which several other council members signed on to as well, but not the ones that had refused to sign on to the proclamation that was originally.
Because I do recall, which something I do think we need to discuss too, is Mayor Parker's actual speech was a lot more bold than I was expecting, but I think she was again, it's easy to switch words, but I think she used the word proclamation, which is why I'm personally a little confused as someone who was sitting in the city.
And the article said proclamation too. So
exactly.
I think people
when it's written down, it always
up.
says recognition, but everyone verbally says proclamation.
We're all used to a proclamation.
Exactly.
That's what we've been doing for the last 10 years.
But it's important to know, it's why this is important, little nuances, because it's not a proclamation, and by saying it out loud that it's a proclamation, it gives her and the Fort Worth kind of establishment cover that they shouldn't get. We're still, because I felt like, again, me as an ally who was sitting in the audience, it felt like a very inspiring moment. It felt like there was a lot of passion, a lot of excitement, and again, this was world-class Maddie Parker up there in the sense of her as a politician. She looked great. She said all the right things. I was like, oh, and everyone was joy. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And so for me, I was like, I couldn't get an understanding of how okay everyone was. This was enough, or is this a baby step?
No.
What is y'all's, as someone who's more involved, what were your guys' take?
So my thoughts were since last year turned out so bad, that when I heard that Maddie Parker said, as long as she's mayor, there will always be a Pride proclamation, that alone was surprising. And then when I showed up to City Hall, so many people were there, and that was great to see. And then when we all gathered up front for a big photo and all, hearing Maddie's words, I was like, well, that's surprising. But then as she was talking, I look to my side and I see Deborah Peoples. I'm like, awesome, thank you, Deborah. And then I look over and I see Charles Lauersdorf, and I'm like, what? And then I look up on the dais and it's empty. And I'm like, what's happening? I look across from me and I see Macy Hill. All the people who were so against it last year, they all stood up.
But I kind of saw them walk, begrudgingly. I mean, they kind of I guess we're going, I saw Alan Blake, it looked like, it's my perspective, looked like he was kind of got out of seat, okay, I guess we're all going down there kind of thing.
I mean, the fact that they stood at all was nice. I mean, the bare minimum, but still surprising compared to what happened last year. And that combined with Maddie's much stronger language than we're used to hearing for stuff like this.
Yeah, I think that it's an improvement from last year, but I think last year moved us back so far that an improvement from last year still has us behind where we were prior to last year.
Very much so.
And I think that I was worried going into it. I wasn't sure it was going to be as strong as it was, because on the agenda, it just said a declaration that y'all means all in Fort Worth, and there was no language attached that I could go and read to see how strong it was going to be. And the y'all means all is a tourist slogan for Fort Worth, which is great. I'm glad that it is, but it also came out of strife as well. Back when they were attacking trans people and putting trans bills about bathrooms into the Texas legislature, it was impacting tourism and business in Fort Worth. And so all of the convention and visitors bureaus were declaring that was a negative impact on tourism business for Texas, and that the legislature needed to back off on that. And that's when the y'all means all came out as kind of a tourist slogan to signal that we were welcoming to all communities, because they saw it hurting business.
Yeah.
And this year, the focus was on kind of the economic impact that the LGBTQ community brings in all of their endeavors, whether supporting work or the work that they do, and the economic positive gain that is resulting from being more inclusive in our community.
Yeah, I wasn't super wild about that.
Yeah. We do that all the time.
I know. She was really pumping this whole economic entrepreneurship thing a lot. I was like, well, I mean,
people are worth more than the economic value
of ourselves, 100%.
Yeah. And I think that to the point I was making before about the District 4 representative in his quotes about this is how they should have done it last year. Had they done it this way last year, I would have, been fine. But he was like, they made it about people. It was about people last year too. It was about organizations that support people. And so to me, that was very much saying trans people are not people. Yeah. And that was very off-putting to me.
I hope he's learning things, because I did see him go up and talk with Sharon from LGBTQ Saves.
Oh, okay.
And give
Yeah,
her
I
a
think
hug.
We're talking about
have
Charlie Lauersdorf,
Yes.
District 4.
Exactly. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
and
I was
think
surprised
that
to
she
see
has said that he is very much been willing to sit down and learn from her.
And I personally think Charlie Lauersdorf is just like wasn't a born bred politician,
No.
and he just kind of slid in. Say, hey, I'm going to act. He won a seat that wasn't really competitive. There wasn't an established candidate, and I think he's trying to find his way. And I'm not. Again, he also had Nate Scatzline at his donation party or his endorsement party, so it's not like he's a good guy. But I think he's also kind of a lost average Republican, not lost Republican, just a lost person trying to figure out what kind of politician am I going to be. But I'm still not saying it's going to be good.
Like learning about the world. Because when he first ran, it was like him and his opponent were having a competition to see who could say the dumbest stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when he won and like started learning about actual city business, he's like, oh, this is more complicated than I thought. And it's like, yeah, of course it is.
For office do that.
Yeah. So I think he's
people don't understand what the job is.
Yeah. I think he's slowly learning. I mean, he still is ignorant on a lot of things, but I would like for him to learn and get support.
I think I'm ultra sensitive to anything that's said negatively about trans people, just because I know and love a lot of trans people.
What I would like to know is what would be a proper ask. Something me and Ann always talk about. I'm always sending her photos of the Boston mayor or the Atlanta mayor or Minneapolis, and just seeing like, holy smokes, there is pride flags down the street. There's pride flags on business doors. The streets are painted. Like, there is so much more that, let's be clear, smaller populated cities are doing. And what should be the ideal ask? And those are just celebratory. What are some even like policy or things?
We had the strongest policies in Fort Worth for the longest time. Like, we were the first cities to put in place protections for LGBTQ people.
Yeah.
And we were really proud of that. And that's why I say that because of what happened last year, our rankings of all of that measurement have dropped. And that's why it's very disconcerting. But I think it's because people weren't paying attention before. And those of us who were pushing for being more inclusive were able to do that. And then folks have started to come in now and try to undo that and unravel that.
And that's where the Christian nationalism, I think, shows up with mercy culture and shows up with this whole playbook. And now it's some problem now.
Yeah.
But you said there was policies or things that you feel like people want to see more of, or what's your take?
I mean, I would love for there to be pride flags everywhere, but that's the performative part of it.
Correct.
Like, there has to be policy like guaranteeing people's safety and inclusion in
our education, our libraries, our access. Yeah,
just making everyone feel safe. Yes.
And one thing, there's two things. One is a quick one. We mentioned Michael Crane. This is a very important, because I noticed it when I was doing kind of research on this story. He wasn't there at this one, and he wasn't there at the last one. So he's back to back. Wasn't there. He also wasn't there for the redistricting vote. This is a man who we all know wants to run for mayor of Fort Worth if Maddie Parker Ezra steps down. And a man we have seen in two places at once. We see when you choose not to be here for people. So I think that's important for all of us to know. When Michael Crane acts like he's your buddy and he shows up to your event, that when it's important, he's not there. Well, here you go. Speaking for someone who is not silent, Judge Tim O'Hare decides to seep into our city more of his extremism ideas, where Fort Worth, in the Fort Worth Report, we have an article showing that an historic LGBTQ marker was abandoned after a letter from Judge Tim O'Hare. Supposedly, he was demanding that the application for a Texas Historical Commission application would be rescinded after, I guess, he got wind of it. And I believe, if I'm correct, this is the historical marker for the same event we were talking about earlier.
The location of it was going to be where the former Rainbow Lounge was located.
But was it a historical marker for that moment, or just a historical marker for...
It was broader than that moment. It was recognizing LGBTQ history more broadly. Not that is a part of history in Fort Worth, but it was recognizing more broadly the history of LGBTQ people in Fort Worth.
And honestly, Anne, I feel like you almost considered breaking this story earlier, and you didn't. We didn't, because there was a lot of news to be still done. How do you feel like this story has come together, and like how much, like, now that it is news, like I feel like it's a good thing that it's finally news, but we're kind of concerned that it was going to be under the radar. So like, what's your kind of take on what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that the Fort Worth Report did a really good job of going back and tracking down exactly what transpired here. Because to your point, there was a request from the city to recognize this history from this, taking it to the state level for a state marker. And that part of that process takes it through Tarrant County, but there's a Tarrant County Historical Commission, and they take a look at it just to make sure that it's accurate, the language is accurate. They have a checklist of things that they check through, and all of that was done. My understanding is that there have been other markers that have gone through the exact same process that were not flagged and held up with a letter from our county judge. So it seems pretty clear that this was specifically targeted because of the content and the recognition of the stories and the history that this marker specifically was highlighting.
Yeah, and for more context, like even though Rainbow Lounge burned down in like 2018, 2019, where the marker would go is kind of Fort Worth's little neighborhood. Like there's 4 or 5 bars all on one intersection.
And it's looking so great.
Say what?
It looks so great right now too.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of flags there.
Yeah.
We don't have them on City Hall like some other cities have. We definitely have them there.
It looks great.
Exactly. So it's still like a perfect place for this to go. And yeah.
One thing that someone in our Discord mentioned about the quote from Judge O'Hare's staff. It was quote unquote, I'm going to read it. It's like two sentences. It should come as no surprise Judge O'Hare doesn't support a historical marker glorifying radical gender ideology and drag performances. People visit public spaces for recreation and relaxation, often with their children. As a vast majority of our nation agrees, transgenderism should not be pushed on our children. That was the quote.
Wildly
Which didn't even
ignorant.
respond to the questions, is my understanding.
Yeah.
Like they were sent specific questions, and this response was not even responding to what was asked. They just chose to push forward their ideology in their response, and that is
their wildly
attacking
ignorant
people.
response.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess, like, to me, the big part of this story, it's like, it's this balance pushed back between city's power and our county's power, and Judge Tim O'Hare having the ability to do stuff like this, and what should be the expectations from our city officials when things like this happen. You know, like, I think a great example of this at scale right now is like California versus, it feels like, America or Trump America, right? It's like Gavin Newsom's trying to fight against whatever Trump's trying to do, trying to arrest him, and like there's like this battle going back and forth. But it feels like defending the people you care about, what's the responsibility of that, of our city officials in times like this? What do you think? How should we navigate this?
It's crazy because for the longest time, conservative people believed in local control. Yeah. And so to come in and have the higher, the broader levels of government saying, we want to control what these people are doing at the local level is not conservatism. That is the opposite of what they've said for years and years and years.
Well, they also say they're fiscal conservatives too, and
right.
they're
And then
incredible
they don't even measure,
at wasting money.
Yeah, not measuring the fiscal impact of the things that they're doing as long as it's along their ideological lines.
Yep.
And so this is, again, just their ideological lines, and they're wanting to not allow the stories to be told of community members that they don't think should exist, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to answer your question about how should the city operate here, I see it as what Elizabeth Beck did last year when the Pride Proclamation didn't pass. Like, oh, you're not going to do what needs to be done? Cool. We're going to figure out a quick workaround and make sure this still happens.
Yeah.
So, like, I would love to see on the city level figure out, okay, what can we do to make a historical marker appear where it needs to be to honor LGBTQ history.
Yeah.
Well, and one would hope that in going back and looking and seeing that other markers went through the exact same process that he says it was a flawed process, well, then why didn't those get taken away either? But the people who were involved said it wasn't a flawed process.
Yep.
There is no written process, and they followed the procedures that they have done up to this point in every other historic marker that they've done.
And if he thinks it's flawed, why didn't he speak up earlier? Yeah.
I believe that some of these markers, represent like Black history in Fort Worth and, various other things. So, yeah, it's very clearly targeting this specific marker.
And,
but I think it got a lot of attention because it came to light during the month of June when we were all paying attention.
The news broke like one day after the other.
And in my presentation, when my speech at the rally, I kind of talked about this epicenter of extremism that I would really say Tarrant for Change and their podcast coined for me when they were here. But the Christian nationalism, mercy culture style politicians they're creating, like Nathan Scatzline, which is a state rep who, when he is up at the state, it says R-Fort Worth. His key bill that he pushed and introduced was House Bill 1375, which was the bill about not allowing independent bookstores to have books about LGBTQ history, rights, and voices. And if you did, and kids are allowed to go into your bookstores, you will get arrested. So it's like, I think why this is such a important topic, like you said, even beyond June, it's just like, this is a direct attack on them trying to control a city that is becoming more, it's always been, but we need to be able to call this out, and we need our city officials to realize it's not just the county level, it's our state reps who are aligned to try to get this oppressed in Fort Worth. Mm-hmm. Man, this episode is just, this is probably our like most positive, at least like us champion episode, because all this news feels relatively like inspiring outside of Tim O'Hare, but it's just like,
Fort Worth is a great place.
Yeah, like Fort Worth is a great place. So the third short story is the National Juneteenth Museum received $10 million from Texas lawmakers for its development in Fort Worth's historic Southside Museum. CEO Jared Howard, friend of the show, reported this on June 9th. The Texas House Senate approved the allocation through the state budget, but it still awaits Governor Abbott's signature. Howard said that state's new financial support was a bipartisan effort, adding that Senators Kelly Hancock from North Richland Hills, Phil King from Weatherford, as well as Rep. Nicole Collier were some of the Texas county leaders involved in the fundraising campaign. Neither responded to requests for comment by publication time. But Jared Howard's quote is, "We are thrilled the legislators saw the value in the work and what we're doing around Juneteenth and in the historic South Side, and are happy to partner with them on this historic project." It's also important to note Juneteenth is this weekend. They're having their this week. And in an array of events, I'm off like on the 19th and ain't going to work on the 20th. So it's like just a long weekend. But there's an array of things going on here in Fort Worth that we can all be a part of.
I also
called their Vibe Fest.
Yes. I also wanted to add that this $10 million that they just got, that puts them at $50 million of the 70 that they need to complete the museum. So it's like they're making real good progress on making that museum a reality. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. But it's important to know that while the museum is not built yet, and it's still being fundraised, the National Juneteenth Museum is already mobilizing and doing an inaugural Freedom Vibe Festival. And if you didn't hear their vision about it, go back to listen to Jared Howard's episode with us, where he talked about the importance of it and really creating a festival that's a part of the pre-construction programming aimed to make Panther City the nation's epicenter for Juneteenth education and celebration. And he's been very thoughtful about making this a space to celebrate Black culture and not having to pander our culture to white spaces, but creating a Black space that also invites other people to learn and experience and be a part of that joy with them. And so when he talks, their marketing, the way they're lifting up Black voices, the people that they're bringing in the OJs and the Whisperers, which is going to be super dynamic at the Bass Hall. They're bringing in several others, and even our local artists. I see some of our local artists are also getting to have access to some of the event agenda.
Yeah, so at Fort Works Art, one of the best galleries in town, they're having an art show. It opened up last Thursday. It runs until July 19th. That show is curated by Christopher Blay, who's an awesome local artist, and he works at the Juneteenth Museum. And the show features some of the best Black artists in town, like Letitia and Cedric Huckabee, who own Kinfolk House, another one of the best galleries in town. So it's a really cool show. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I know, and there's also the Fort Worth Report gave us a list of upcoming events.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, they've had a really incredible dynamic speaker series, which has been super popular. I think you and I have attended all, if not most of those, and they are continuing on with that. So there's a speaker as well. But there's so much more this time. There is a Declarations of Freedom exhibition.
Yeah, that's what I was talking
That's the art show that Wesley was just talking about. There is a poetry skits at Juneteenth celebration that's happening on the 13th of June. There is a parade through Fort Worth in honor of Opalie's Walk, which we have done every year since she started this effort. And that's going to be starting at Farrington Field.
Starting very early in the morning. Yeah.
There's a combination of free events and things that are required admission, and all of that is noted in this article. Then there's also a lot of music. As you mentioned, I think there's a concert at Bass Hall. And
in Sundance Square, too.
That's the one in Sundance Square, I think, is being curated by another person who's been on the podcast, and that is Brandy Waller-Pace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a ton. We're going to obviously have these links in here. I mean,
I know you always get on my case for reading articles, and here I am. There's so many things.
It's a long list.
Yeah, this is a long list. And I do want to shout out, just because we often there's no work done in the pod without these people, but all the Fort Worth Report and Star Telegram reporters. But I mean, for this Juneteenth stuff, Dave Moreno has been outstanding, and for all the advocacy work, Cecilia Linzen has just been incredible. I think really 2 stars in the game. That it's just cool to see people. I mean, it's just wild how people show up to have to be journalists and tell the news and the truth about things, and have to do it and build so much context so fast, and to be able to do that for something like Juneteenth, with so much history and so much back, to be able to make something like this. You can tell Dave Moreno put a lot of work into it. So shout out to him as well.
He had to do all that like last week too, because he's in Guadalajara right now. So like, man, he was getting a lot of stuff out.
Yeah, so incredible work. I'm literally this whole week just having this on my phone. I'm like, all right, what am I going to today?
I know. I was trying to coordinate schedules with Jim this morning, and Jim is more reluctant to go to as many things as I want to go to. So I was like, how about this? How about that? And this 4:30 a.m. schedule is thwarting my ability to get him to go to some of this stuff. So I might have to find some other friends to go.
And one of the like, I think call outs we were talking about, but something I do want that I think it's massively important because Juneteenth, and we're becoming the Juneteenth city, and it does play at the same time Pride Month. I think it's also important, and I think for any queer listeners who are involved in Pride Month, I think when we listen to Jared Howard and we talk about creating spaces for all to experience Black culture and success, I think it's crucial for our white LGBTQ allies to really show up for Juneteenth. I would like to say, in my perfect world, 20 years later, Fort Worth has the Juneteenth flag up, it has the Pride flag up. These are equal, equitable, represented months of things that we enjoy, at least for this week. And I think that is actually something that I think should be more proactively done, because of being a white person. I think that responsibility is very important for us to be the proactive ones on doing that. And so that's my call out there. All right, so we got to the final segment where we talk about wins, losses, and actions. We'll talk to Wesley first. What is your win for today?
Well, this weekend was the opening of SparkFest. I'm wearing the t-shirt.
Ow!
It's been great so far. Opening night was completely sold out. We had a blessing from local elder Leslie Thunderhawk, a mural unveiling from Greg Deal, which it's such a good mural. And then we had Ray Zaragoza, who I didn't even realize writes protest songs.
Wow.
And she premiered her latest protest song inspired by all the ICE raids and people's reaction to it. And it's her best song. It's so good. And she was going to get on a 5 a.m. flight to DC to go to that protest. And I was like, man, I wish you could stay. Like, we have a big one. It's going to be fun. And as I was leaving the protest to like go do SparkFest stuff, I was like, oh, that looks like Ray Zaragoza walking across the street. Sure enough, it was. She was like so inspired by like what happened at SparkFest and everyone's reaction that she decided to stay, go to the protest, just hang out, enjoy Fort Worth more. It's like, hell yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then yesterday we had an indigenous vendor market. So it was Amphibian's first time having a vendor market, my first time hosting a vendor market. It was in the South Main Micro Park, and it was just so cool. Like, seeing, like, people came from all over. One guy came from Farmington, New Mexico to sell his stuff, and one lady brought her entire family from Tulsa to sell fry bread, and it was so good. I highly recommend.
That's my loss. Missing that was my loss. After the whole day that I had that on my calendar, but then had people coming over, and I was like, I cannot do it. And now that you're talking about it, I really realize what I missed out on.
Well, the good news is SparkFest is still going, so it's going from until June 22nd. So a lot of more fun stuff to check out.
Yeah.
My win is basically just all of the camaraderie and the coming together that has occurred over the various things that we've talked about today. I think that Juneteenth and the No Kings rally and it being Pride Month has all just re-inspired me and made me believe again in the people in the community that we find ourselves in. And so I'm going to try to hang on to that through losses and other things and look more positively at where we are and where we could be going forward. So that's my win for this week.
My win, I guess, man, I was going to go in so many different directions, but I guess I'm just going to keep it simple. I would just say community, being able to be around organizers, like I said earlier, that you're now becoming friends with because you're just showing up at these spaces. And it's just always great to see them, and it's people from all walks of life. And so that community, we broke bread at your house the other day, so that was really awesome to do that with a group of people that we've been working hard with for a very long time. So that was really awesome to do.
It's really nice to come together in a space that's just for being social with people you've been working so hard alongside on issues and topics that are hard. So I really enjoyed that as well.
Yeah. My win was going to be me. I was going to consider Mia Hall, but I was like, I can't give her that much of a bone. Yeah, I can't do that.
You got to see if she does more.
Got to live up to it.
Yeah. Cool. So what about losses?
I mean, my loss, I think, is probably the opposite of what my win just was, and that is that there has been some backsliding in so many things that we, the community, have been working on for decades. And it feels like, to your point, when you talk about days and decades and the importance of the work that we're doing having an impact for decades, not just days, it feels sometimes like in just days, some of the work that has been going on to try to influence the decades has been sliding. But I'm going to stick with the win side of it and focus on the positives and the community that we're building and the people who are coming forward that we've never met before, and try to stay on the positive of all of that.
My loss is that the Echo Heights community showed up to City Hall last week to stand up against FedEx getting some type of legal process thing passed to allow them to continue, which was something that they haven't had passed over the 5 years. Like, they weren't keeping up with their permits. And there's hundreds of FedEx trucks that sit in Echo Heights that makes environmental justice need to be happen. I mean, this is just something you see across all black and brown neighborhoods, but this pollutes the air, it ruins infrastructure, it is dangerous to community when they don't listen to signs. And so FedEx has a long history of not doing the right things to black and brown communities. And so Echo Heights basically had a protest. They also had their community members at City Hall. It was the same day as the proclamation was. And because it was in Councilwoman Martinez's district, she wasn't there because she was in Indonesia for a sister cities with the city. So she wasn't there. But the communication of that didn't happen until we were all at City Hall. And so all this energy and grassroots organizing that was meant to advocate for residents and for environmental justice got oppressed and silenced. And it was a huge loss. I think it's a huge loss by Councilwoman Jeanette for like not getting her staff to proactively engage and communicate that. But it was also a loss because people still signed up to speak. And basically, Ann, you're telling me that should have maybe still been allowed to because it was on the agenda, or what is your take there?
I mean, in the past, when an agenda item has been continued to a future meeting at that late of a time in the process, if there are people who have signed up to speak, it is up to those people to decide whether they want to hold their comments until the continued date or whether they want to go ahead and speak at the meeting that they've showed up for.
Quick clarifying question. When you say hold their comments, you mean they're only going to be able to speak one or the other time?
No, they could speak. They could
Both.
sign up again for
Good.
the continued date as well. So
As
they
it should
could
be.
speak at the meeting for which they signed up for originally. But it's typically been up to the individual who's signed up. And that has been because people have taken the time to sign up ahead of time and show up for an item that was on the agenda. And in this case, they just said, I might have missed it, but I didn't even hear the explanation of why the item got continued. And that goes back to the thing I complained about before about how they handle the agenda now, where they make people speak all up front before the action is taken by the council. And so your comments are not tied directly to the thing. So they were listing off by numbers without explanation of the description of the item. And so unless I'm looking at the agenda and searching down the number, I don't even know which item they're talking about. And they were saying that some of the things were being continued. So there were lots of people there ready to get up and speak about their concerns on that zoning case. It's a request for a conditional use permit. And they were told, we're not discussing this until this future meeting, and not given the opportunity to speak then. And some folks went up to the podium and said, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
This was,
we should be allowed to speak.
We should be allowed to speak, and we weren't given notice, and we're just shut down and told, no, we're not talking about this here. So I think the better way to handle it would have been to allow people to make that decision. And often people do say, I'll save my comments. I'll sign up to speak at the next meeting and speak there so that it's in proximity to the decision that's being made. But in this case, the Echo Heights Stop 6 Environmental Coalition has been activated and expressing their concerns about these conditions in their neighborhood that surround an area that was designated as an as a industrial growth center, and has negative impacts on black and brown communities because of the proximity for a long time. And in my opinion, the city has not handled it very well at all. Yep. They claim to want to talk about environmental justice and put that into the comprehensive plan that they're in the process of updating. But because that process has been kind of elongated and strung out, it seems a lot like placating and putting off and not wanting to take seriously the concerns that are being brought up by a community that is being harmed by zoning that has been put in their neighborhood.
Yeah. It was interesting because I was at City Council that whole day for the Pride Proclamation, and because I got Amphibian to get a proclamation honoring 25 years of their existence. And so I had all of Amphibian staff with me, and they've never been to a city council meeting before. And I was like, what a perfect one to come to, because like you can really see like an encapsulation of what it's like. You can see, the cutesy stuff with the kids getting their recognition for winning the science fair. You can see Maddie Parker surprisingly doing the right thing with the Pride Proclamation. But then you can also see the other side of Maddie Parker about, pulling what it looks like is pulling strings behind the scenes to make sure people's voice isn't heard. especially because, there's going to be a lot of eyes on the Pride Proclamation, and didn't want to also get yelled at that day by the Echo Heights neighborhood. So it was very disappointing seeing that, but also very emblematic of how city council tends to go.
The interesting thing too was, to your point about Councilwoman Martinez not being there, I think all three of the council members who were not physically there, Jared's no longer on the council, but Jared and Jeanette and Michael Crane were all in Indonesia, is my understanding, on that Sister Cities trip. And Crane was there virtually, was he not?
He was. Yeah. Well, until it was Zoom cut out, but yeah, he was there.
Yeah. So I think there was issues with the Zoom for all of that. But knowing that they were going to be in Indonesia, they probably should have made a call about whether that zoning case was going to go forward in their absence or not, and let the people know. Because I know a lot of times when there is something where a council member is going to make a motion to continue to a future meeting, staff will call all the people who have signed up and let them know ahead of time, this is going to be continued. And even in those cases, it's on the agenda. So if they signed up to speak, they would still be given the chance to talk about it. But that may be a change that has happened since I left.
But even when that does happen, there's so little notice. Like that happened because I saw Pam Young was there for the environmental justice stuff. And that's happened to me and her before, where it was a 10 a.m. meeting. We got a call at 9 a.m. saying that we weren't going to be allowed to talk. Yeah. It's like everyone already took off work. Like that's not enough notice.
Yeah, they have to do 72 hours notice for the full agenda. But if they're going to take something off the agenda, I guess that same rule doesn't apply. And that's, to my point, I always thought that if it was on the agenda and they were just voting to continue it to another meeting or move it to another meeting by either the staff doing that or something else, that if it was agenda-sized, then that should mean that anybody who signed up to speak on it should be able to speak on it.
Yeah.
Well, that's not even the case, because after that happened to me and Pam, like that was the whole thing that we talked about, is like we should still be allowed to speak, and they just straight up wouldn't.
I think that's a change that happened since I left. I think that's part of the trying to not have to listen to as many angry people for as long.
But then that just makes people more angry.
Oh, I totally understand. I agree.
All right, that was a very long loss. All right.
Yeah. Do you have a quick one?
No, that was. I mean, I'm right there with you.
Okay,
like,
cool.
That was genuinely a loss.
Yeah.
I hate it when people's voices aren't heard.
Yeah. All right. So we're now going to move into actions, and my action is literally this Tuesday, 6 p.m. We have another city council meeting where we are having public comments, and this is the important one because we're using this moment and this momentum from Tarrant County redistricting, from No Kings Rally, to then now move on to the offense where we're going to show up and empower our now, today, 6-5 city council that is majority Democrats, meaning that what you see is that there is a block that voted for a resolution against the redistricting process. Before it was the majority, the Democrats voted against mercy culture. There is a block, and now that block is the majority, allowing them to do some of the things that we have talked about on this podcast, that we've talked about, like campaign financing, like how city meetings are run, how do we distribute hundreds of millions of dollars around our communities, is now something that we actually don't need to wait on the mayor to have courageous leadership. We have these 6 who could be courageous. And so we would love to see you 6 p.m. If you don't like to speak, you can also just be there in the audience as a supporter.
And you can also put in written comment.
Yes, written comments as well.
All the council members get.
And basically the call to action is, hey, if Tarrant County wants to make our city deep red, it's time to flex Fort Worth blue values. And so that's basically the push. It's like, we're giving you leadership is something you step into. It's time for you. Carlos Flores, Deborah Peoples, Mia Hall, Chris Nettles, Jeanette Martinez, and Elizabeth Beck. These 6 now actually have the most power to go against this conservative extremism we've been talking about, from Judge O'Hare to this rezoning stuff from Governor Abbott, and even at the national level that we'd even talk about, where they're trying to oppress our votes here in Tarrant County.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that kind of leads into something else we were wanting to talk about, is that it seems like what Tim O'Hare did in redistricting Tarrant County in Republicans' favor, even though they are not the majority necessarily. Now that has inspired federal attention to try and get that done on the Texas level as well. Like it's the exact same story, a mid-census redistricting to rig the system in the favor of Republican candidates.
Crazy.
It's diabolical.
But what we've also saw.
Well, this goes with what we keep saying is that where Tarrant County goes, Texas goes. Where Texas goes, the nation goes. So it's like, this is all the more reason why we need to work so hard here to make a difference.
And speaking of nation attention,
there we go.
There is someone coming to Fort Worth that I think took a lot of us by surprise.
He said, enough's enough.
Your wish came true, EJ.
There is a Star Telegram article.
You don't have to say that. You say Bernie Sanders coming to town, June 22nd, Dickies Arena. We're here.
Back to my reading of articles. We'll put it in the show notes so you know all the details. Yes. But yes, Bernie Sanders is coming to Fort Worth, Texas.
Yes. Sunday, June 22nd at 6 p.m. at Dickies Arena.
Although the doors open at 3:30.
Because it's going to, I mean, what do you guys think? 24,000 seats in there?
I think it depends on the setup, but I thought that it was like 14,000.
Oh, really?
15,000 is the...
Let's see.
Google is free.
Because we were kind of talking about it around when we were at your house, we were talking about what's the size. Yep, 14,000. Man, I was way off. I thought it was a big city arena.
That thing got built while I was in office. I know how big it is.
Yeah. But I mean, so it's for sure going to full out. You got to get there at 3:30, maybe even earlier, because if you just take the 4,000 people at Fort Worth, the 10,000 people at Dallas protest, the 1,200 people at Arlington, the 800, it's full with just the people who showed up to No Kings.
That's true.
Like,
if everybody shows up for that.
I mean, what a great momentum.
I do have to say one thing. So Fort Worth tends to get really hung up about parking, and parking in the cultural district is a huge issue for people, and you do have to pay for parking if you're going to park in the cultural district. So I would encourage you to not let that keep you from showing up. There are other ways to get there. And if somebody wants to have me pay for their parking, I would be happy to. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. But
I mean, I don't know. Hey, Ann Zeta will pay for your parking. Come to Bernie.
I would really encourage you to buy a bus ticket and take the bus, because there is a number 2 bus that drops off on Camp Bowie that's just a couple blocks from Dickies Arena. Unfortunately, the Dash no longer takes you right outside Dickies Arena. We'll hopefully get back to that at some point. But there are ways to get there besides
the number
driving
2
in your car. The number 2 from downtown. You can come on the train, take the number 2, get off just on Camp Bowie, a couple blocks. I think it's on Detour, actually, because of the construction on Camp Bowie, which puts you even closer to Dickies Arena because it goes over onto Lancaster, I think. So
yeah, I plan to ride my bike over there.
Look at that.
That too.
It's important to know Greg Kazar will be on that list, which is a rising progressive Texas politician. He will be presenting, and Beto O'Rourke will also be speaking. So you're going to have a great crowd, and there's some local organizers. I know the union guy who led and did a great start for No Kings, he's presenting, and so a lot of different local people will be there too. I'm excited for this in Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, guys. This means a lot. Like, we had to be making some progress standing up against Tim O'Hare, where Bernie Sanders said, hey, we're coming to Fort Worth, Texas. Guys, there's so much to be excited about right now. It just feels like the tide's moving. But again, hopefully, my biggest thing is, like, we always got to think about how do we don't get people tired? How do we keep the endurance to 2026? But this is a great start to the journey. All right, beautiful people, there you have it. Another episode of the 817 podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to like it, subscribe, and share with a friend. We do this every Monday morning where we talk about and analyze the city with Ann Zeta and Wesley Kirk.